A lot of veterans don't expect this. You can have real diagnosed sleep apnea. You can be sleeping with a CPAP machine every single night, and the VA can still turn you down. Not because the apnea isn't real, but because of how the claim was put together. It goes wrong the same few ways, again and again. So let's go through it start to finish and get it right. And when it's built right, a sleep apnea rating is worth a real monthly benefit. The VA rates it in 4 tiers, and the middle tier pays 50% on its own. It's also one of the more common ways a rating you already have can lead to another claim. So we'll cover both paths in the direct claim and the secondary. This is the Veteran Field Manual, plain English VA benefits, straight from the rules. If that's what you need, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Now let's go through how the VA actually rates sleep apnea. The first thing to understand is that a sleep apnea claim has 2 separate parts. Part 1 is service connection, proving your apnea is tied to your service. Part 2 is the rating, how much the VA pays once it's connected. And this matters. Almost every denial you'll hear about is lost on Part 1, the connection, not the rating. So that's where most of your work belongs. You have to clear both. We'll start with the rating, because that's what most people came to understand, then spend real time on the connection, because that's the part that decides the claim. Before either part, there's a step you can't skip, the diagnosis. The VA won't rate sleep apnea based on snoring or on feeling tired. It wants a formal sleep study, an overnight test in a lab, or an approved at-home study that gets the apnea documented. Without a sleep study in your records, there's no rateable diagnosis, and the claim stops there. One note before we go further. This is general information, not medical or legal advice, so review your own situation with a doctor who knows your history. If you've never been tested and you think you have it, that test is step 1. Once you have that diagnosis, the rating comes from one place in the law, the Sleep Apnea Code, Diagnostic Code 6847 in Section 497 of Title 38. It sets out 4 tiers, and which tier applies depends on how the apnea is treated. Here are the 4, from the bottom up. 0%. You have documented sleep-disordered breathing, but no real symptoms. It's connected, but it pays nothing on its own. 30%. Persistent daytime sleepiness, the kind that follows you through the day. 50%. Your apnea requires a breathing assistance device, like a CPAP or a BiPAP. And 100%. Chronic respiratory failure with carbon dioxide retention or cor pulmonale that strain on the heart, or you need a tracheostomy. Now, the 50% tier is the one that matters most. So let's go through it. The rule is direct. If your sleep apnea requires a CPAP machine, that's 50%. Not 10, not 30. And this is the part that decides it. The proof that you require the device is the prescription for it in your medical records. A doctor prescribed the CPAP, that fact is documented, and that documentation is what earns the 50%. So the most important thing you can do is confirm that CPAP prescription is in the file the VA is going to read. One more point on that latter. The 50% depends on needing the CPAP. If you don't use one, you can't tolerate the mask, or one was never prescribed, you're rated on your symptoms instead. Documented daytime sleepiness supports 30%, and a diagnosis with no symptoms is 0. It moves the other way too. If you're rated at 30 and later start on a CPAP, that's grounds to file for an increase to 50. And if you were prescribed a CPAP but stopped using it, talk to your doctor first, because it can lower your rating. But remember, Part 1. None of those tiers pay anything until the apnea is service connected. There are 2 paths to that. The first is direct. Your apnea started in service, or it ties to something that happened there. Sometimes it was even diagnosed while you were still in. If that's your situation, you file it directly. The second path is the one more veterans should look at, and that's the secondary claim. Let's take the direct path first because it's the harder one, and it's where most sleep apnea claims are lost. Most veterans were never tested for apnea while they were in. The sleep study came years later, in civilian life. So the VA looks at the file, sees no diagnosis in service, and denies the claim as unconnected. The answer is to show the symptoms started in service, even when the diagnosis didn't. Your service treatment records may already note fatigue, trouble sleeping, or weight gain. And this is where lay statements matter most. The people who served with you and your spouse can describe what they saw: the loud snoring, the choking or gasping at night, the times you stopped breathing, the exhaustion during the day. They don't have to be doctors. Under the VA's own rules, that kind of first-hand account is competent evidence, and the VA can't dismiss it just because it isn't written in your service records. You put these in writing on VA. Form 21-10-210. They don't diagnose the apnea. The sleep study does that. But they build the bridge from your service to the diagnosis you have today, and a doctor's nexus opinion finishes the connection. A secondary means your sleep apnea was caused or made worse by another condition the VA has already rated. This path is worth looking at because it doesn't ask you to reach all the way back to your service. It only has to reach a condition that's already connected. The clearest example is post-traumatic stress. It disrupts your sleep, and it can drive the weight changes and the nighttime muscle tone changes that feed apnea. The link between post-traumatic stress and sleep apnea is established enough that the VA grants it regularly when you bring a solid medical opinion. If you're already rated for post-traumatic stress, or a sinus condition, or anything tied to your breathing or your weight, your apnea might be a secondary you haven't filed. Whichever path you're on, a medical nexus is usually what decides it. The nexus is a doctor's opinion tying the two conditions together. For a secondary, you want that doctor to state, in plain terms, that your rated condition, at least as likely as not, caused or aggravated your sleep apnea, and to give the reasoning behind it. If it's aggravation, a rated condition making an apnea you already had worse, that route adds one step, a baseline showing how bad the apnea was before it was aggravated, which the secondary conditions video covers in full. At least as likely as not is the VA's standard, a 50-50 balance in your favor, and a nexus that meets it with real medical reasoning is worth more than any amount of paperwork. This is the same secondary rule, Section 310, we covered in its own chapter. If you haven't seen that one, it goes with this. And how to get a strong nexus opinion is its own chapter too. Now, if you've been reading about sleep apnea and the VA, you've probably seen the alarm online that the 50% CPAP rating is going away. So here's where that actually stands. The VA has proposed changing this rule, first in 2022, with an update in 2024. The proposal would end the automatic 50% for needing a CPAP and tie the rating more to whether treatment actually resolves the problem. But what matters right now is this: it's still only a proposal. As of today, it's not the law. The rule in effect is the one we just went through. Needing a CPAP means 50%. And the VA has said that if the change does go through, veterans already rated would be protected and kept at their current rating. So don't let a headline stop you from filing. File under the rules that exist today, and always check the current regulation at the time you file, because this is the kind of rule that can change. Now the traps, because sleep apnea claims fail in predictable ways. 1. Filing with no sleep study. There's no ratable diagnosis, so it stops cold. 2. Assuming the CPAP alone wins it, the machine gets you the 50% rating, but only after the apnea is service connected. The device is the rating. It's not the connection. 3. Leaving the CPAP prescription out of the records the VA reviews. If the rater can't see that you require the device, you can lose the 50% you earn. 2 more. Filing your apnea as a brand new problem when it's really a secondary, you take on a heavier burden of proof for no reason. And going in with no nexus at all on either path, nothing ties the apnea to your service or to your rated condition, so it fails. Every one of these is fixable before you file. 3 things to take away. First, a sleep apnea claim has 2 parts: connect it, then rate it, and most denials are lost on the connection, so focus your work there. Second, the rating runs 0, 30, 50, 100, and needing a CPAP is the 50, proven by the prescription in your file. Third, if you're already rated for something like post-traumatic stress, Your apnea may be a secondary. Get a nexus and file it that way. So here's what to do. If you've never had a sleep study and you think you have apnea, get tested. That's the diagnosis everything depends on. If you're already diagnosed, pull your records and confirm the CPAP prescription is actually in them, and pick your path. For a direct claim, pull your service records and write lay statements, your own and one from someone who witnessed your symptoms in service on VA Form 21-10-210. For a secondary, tie the apnea to the condition you're already rated for. Either path, get a nexus opinion, then file on VA Form 21-526-EZ and check the current sleep apnea rule at va.gov before you file. If this helped, share it with another vet. There's someone you served with using a CPAP every night who never filed for it, or who was denied once and gave up. This is the video they need. Leave your questions in the comments, what your decision letter said, what your sleep study showed. Another veteran is probably searching that same question tonight, so asking it helps them find this too. Subscribe so you get the next chapter. Sleep apnea looks complicated, but it comes down to a few steps done right. Get diagnosed, connect it, and prove that the treatment works. And that 50% doesn't stand alone, it combines with your other ratings and can raise your overall number. That math is the VA math video. To see how one rating you already hold can lead to secondaries like this one, watch the secondary conditions video. This is the Veteran Field Manual. Stay in the fight.